Welcome to the Newtown Big Dreams podcast, an interview-style talk show that's your gateway to the fabulous and fascinating people who relocated to start a new life. Whether you're new to our podcast or your city, our fellow neighbors from across Canada, North America, and the entire English-speaking world share their stories of reaching new horizons and big dreams. So sit back and relax as we navigate in-depth and intimate conversations with entrepreneurs, thought leaders, executives, creatives, and anyone who can share their story about their Newtown big dreams. And now, here's your host, Luke J. Menkes.
Hey everybody, I'm here today with Pat Moffett, and he's coming to us from Long Island, New York. And Pat is a really interesting guy. He wrote two books, one called Fortunate Soldier, and the other one is called Ice Cream in the Cupboard. And since then, he's created a film, Ice Cream in the Cupboard. It's available on Amazon Prime and other places. So I'm going to put the links to that video in the description here. But today we're going to talk to Pat all about this movie. And Pat, first of all, thank you very much for coming on the show.
Oh, my pleasure. Good to be here.
Excellent. So you wrote this movie. When did you write the book?
The book actually was written in 2009. And my wife's case of early-onset Alzheimer's at 53 was extremely violent. And that's what I really wanted to bring to the surface in the book. And it did fairly well. Surprised a lot of people. The great majority of the world doesn't really understand that you can get Alzheimer's at 29, 49, 55 at those ages. But her case was extremely violent, so I wanted to get that word out to really kind of protect caregivers and let them know, this could happen to you, and life could be quite dangerous. Mm-hmm. And I didn't think the book did enough of the awareness that I wanted to, so I wanted to get more of a film. And I actually ran into someone on an airplane on the way out to L.A. It was another author, and we exchanged books. And he called me a couple of days later, and he said, "Hey, you got to make a movie out of this thing." Mm-hmm. And that's how it really got started. He knew the right people, and it just hooked up. So excellent. I became a producer.
Right. So how long did it take to shoot the film? And then how long, first of all, how long did it take to shoot that film?
The shooting the film took 29 days. That was the base. And I think 3 days of reshoots. So about 32 days altogether with just filming. I
see. And streaming quite a bit now. How many downloads has it had, if you know?
Multi-thousands. I don't have an exact number yet. You get those reports about every 3 or 4 months.
Right. How long did it take to get to this level?
I actually started in December of 2016.
Okay.
And we started shooting in July 2017. Mm-hmm. And the release date was August 2020.
Right.
Which was, of course, fairly timely because of the pandemic. People were, really sort of wanting more content on the social media platforms. And so that's how I got picked up in there with Gravitas Ventures. Right. And so we've been out since August up to this point right now.
Okay. So has this movie been shown at any film festivals?
Yes, we're in the Rhode Island Film Festival, which is quite large. It 45,000 people attended. It was in 2019, and we beat out 6,500 other films. Wow. To get into that. So if you get selected just to get in, it's a real gold star. But we won 2 awards on top of that. The Best Picture for Audience Award and Best Picture Youth Award. Mm-hmm. And it was a thrill and that's how really the development came of people seeking to handle the film.
Right. So was Carmen your wife's name?
Carmen was my wife's name, right.
Yeah. And was she the only person in your family to be stricken with early onset dementia?
Sadly, no. She was the first one in her age group at time 53. But after that, she had one older sister. She was diagnosed with it. Then her brother, then her other third sister, second sister. So 4 out of 4 siblings got it in their 50s. All of them died in their 60s.
Wow.
And all of them were violent cases.
Really? So tell us a little bit about that. It strikes all of a sudden, and then they had about 10 years of really difficult times.
In Carmen's case, yes, it was just about that. She was 53 when she got it diagnosed, and of course, you're okay for a little while, and then things just gradually deteriorate. There's not much they can do. So she had it about 10 years after that. Wow. And, men seem, in the records, men seem to pass on faster than women do when they have the early onset.
Interesting. Does that actually cause death, the Alzheimer's, or is it more of a mental function?
It's in the early onset, it's genetic. I think you want to cover that for a bit. When I started to learn about this, of course, I was stunned. The first happening to me when somebody says, well, when did you really feel that, when did you see something was wrong? We were actually sitting in a restaurant in Puerto Rico, and we had been bickering a lot in New York, and I said, something's not right. She gets mad at everything. So I said, maybe she was Puerto Rican, so I said, let's get away for a romantic weekend. Maybe we're both working too hard. Let's calm down a little bit. And we went down there, and we were just sitting in a restaurant, and I was looking over the railing on this veranda that they had, and commenting on the cars, 58 Chevy, 58 Ford, and how they keep the cars so well down there because of the temperature. And when I turned around, she picked up a plate of steak and lobster and hit me in the face with the plate.
Wow.
So I fell out of the table, hit the table behind me, and she ran out of the restaurant. Mm-hmm. So I ran after her. I was running after her. The police were going after me. They're working, a 6'3" Irish guy chasing a small Puerto Rican woman down the middle of San Juan isn't a good thing. Right. So we got that worked out and everything, and I convinced the police she had too much to drink when in fact she had nothing to drink. But we did get back to the hotel. She laid down at 7 o'clock at night and went to sleep. I went out on a terrace, had 3 of the fastest beers I think I've had in my life. I was totally shaking. I had no idea what this was. Don't forget, I was only 49 and she was 53. You're not thinking Alzheimer's at all. Right. And she walked out on the terrace and said, honey, when are we going to eat? I'm starved. And I said, well, I tried to do that and you threw your food at me. She says, I wouldn't throw my food at you. What's wrong with you? You joke around too much. And how did you get all that stuff on your shirt?
Wow.
Within 15 minutes, that kind of an event didn't even exist.
Wow.
And that's when I got on the next plane back to New York, didn't know what to do. Mm-hmm. Tried to get her examined. She didn't want to go to the doctors. I'm fine, leave me alone. And then one day when we went out food shopping, she put the food away. I went out to the dry cleaners. I came back, and I found this white liquid coming down out of the cupboard where the canned goods are kept. I looked through, and sure enough, there was a deflated box of vanilla ice cream.
Wow.
So, and the next day, the school called me that she was working in and said, we sent her over for an evaluation because she's got the budget messed up. The kids' bus passes are going the wrong direction. The whole school was coming unglued. And that's the day she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's.
Wow. So, ice cream in the cupboard. That obviously relates to the movie title.
Right.
Was that just an event, or is that something?
Yeah, that was the event right there when I found that ice cream. And I said to her, hey, hon, I think you might have put the ice cream away a little bit too fast today. You missed the freezer and put it in the cupboard. Yeah. And she said, I didn't do that. Why don't you blame the kids upstairs? What kids? The kids are already gone.
Wow.
So that was such a pivotal point. I had to name it ice cream in the cupboard.
Mm-hmm. Okay, now I understand. Yeah. So that was an incredibly difficult time for you.
Yes.
Did she have any awareness of what was happening? I mean, you're sending her to the doctor for evaluations, and she's saying, I'm fine.
Yeah. Well, once they told her the diagnosis at the hospital, she came home that night, and she said, I really want to talk to you. And she said, I have a touch of Alzheimer's. Mm. You know, she didn't want to worry me. She was trying to soften it as much as possible so I wouldn't worry. But that's when she addressed it and really knew what she had.
Yeah.
So she would write notes and things like that in case I forget something to tell you, let me write this note. So there were notes everywhere, sticky notes. Mm-hmm. And I used the same things to try to remind her of stuff.
Yeah.
You know, so, but when it starts getting violent, that's when it's very dangerous.
How do you cope with that for a decade?
It was so bad. Within 2 years, she was in 24/7 care. I took her to a Alzheimer's daycare center. I had a caregiver at home, and she punched the caregiver out, punched the cleaning lady out. Wow. She got out of the house. and everyone was looking for her. And so I got into an Alzheimer's daycare center so I could keep my job too. I always tell caregivers, if you have a job and you're not ready to retire, keep your job, because sooner or later they're going to have to need this full-time care that you may not be able to provide. And she punched out an elderly man at the Alzheimer's daycare center who was about 80.
Wow.
So the center called me and said, Mr. Moffett, you better come down here, because you have to understand there's a liability here for us and for you, because you're the core caregiver of the family, and you can be held liable for damages on the punching my wife out to this other man. But fortunately, he had Alzheimer's as well, and the family understood, so there was no lawsuit. But they said, she has to be taken out of here. We can't keep her here. She's too violent.
So where did she go after that?
They recommended another hospital nearby. She could be tested for antipsychotic drugs, and this would take about 3 weeks. You'll see it in the film, and they would be monitoring her 24/7. So there's, I think, 28, 29 of these drugs, and whatever cocktail that seems to work for her, that's what they would do. And then I was led to believe I would be taking my wife home, and she'd be better and calmer, and we'd work the rest of the way. And the doctors came to me on the day that all the tests were done, and they said, Mr. Moffett, we can't tell you what to do, but frankly speaking, you can't take your wife home. These antipsychotic drugs, are so strong, they can't be administered at home. She has to be on 24/7 care.
Wow.
So I took their recommendation, and we went from that hospital right into 24/7 care, and kind of the trap door of my life opened up, and I fell through it. Life had been over for me at that point.
Wow. So what effect does the drugs have on people? I guess it's a sedative.
Yeah, it keeps them calm. It keeps them from lashing out as much as they did. She still got into some things in the dementia center at this particular caregiving facility, but she was much more calmer, and that's what it really does. They're constantly walking back and forth. They never stop sitting down. They're always very hyper, but she didn't hurt anybody there anymore.
And she was never a violent person when she was younger.
No, not at all. Very, very much of a softie. Always worked great with children. We had 5 children, 3 children from her first marriage, 2 from ours. Worked at the Lakeville School. All the kids just loved her there. You know, this is the farthest person in your mind that you could think it would come with any violent act whatsoever.
Wow. So, the actors. Who were the actors in this film? And
the actors, there are 2 that play me. There's a young Pat Moffett and an older Pat Moffett. The older Pat Moffett is a gentleman by the name of Dana Ashbrook. He's quite famous for a series called Twin Peaks.
Right.
He plays the sheriff on that. He's been on that for 7 years. And the Carmen in the later years is played by an actress by the name of Claudia Ferry. She's done several things on Netflix, a series called The Killing. Really magnificent actress and played a beautiful role. You'll be stunned by her performance.
Great.
And then the younger Pat and Carmen was Andrea Londo, a Mexican actress. I think you're going to see a lot more from this young lady in Hollywood over the years. And a brand new actor called Garrett Mercer, who played the young Pat Moffett very, very well. It was really excellently done.
Excellent. So did any of these actors have any attachment to Alzheimer's, or was it brand new for them?
Well, it was amazing, Luke, because Dana Ashbrook called me after he read the book and read the script. He called me at my home here on Long Island, and he said, I can't wait to get into this role. This is amazing. He said, I'm going to play Pat Moffett better than Pat Moffett plays Pat Moffett. You know, I mean, he was really into it, and so was Claudia Ferry. But an interesting thing happened, if I can tell you a quick story on the set.
Please.
We were going to go shooting in a house in Beverly Hills that we rented to do the home shots. So it was a cul-de-sac, and everybody arrived on the cul-de-sac. And there was they took every parking space. There were cars everywhere from the crew and the cast. And a woman yells out from her terrace across the way, next door to the house we're renting, and said, listen, this is a cul-de-sac. You guys are creating a mess here. If I have an emergency in my family, I'm going to have a problem. I'm calling the Beverly Hills police.
Right. And
she did. I said, great. We haven't started the cameras rolling, and the police are on their way. This isn't good. So the police showed up, and my producer, Chamilla Turan, was there. And I said, just let me talk to the police. So the Beverly Hills police officer got on the phone, and she said, Mr. Moffett, look, I know you have permits to do the shooting and all that stuff, but this is right. This woman's correct. Okay, if I had to get an ambulance up this cul-de-sac, I can't fit an ambulance up here. You guys got everything blocked on the sidewalks.
Yeah.
So I said, okay, officer, can you tell me what to do to solve this? I don't want to lose a day of shooting. She said, listen, there's a parking lot about 3 miles from here. Gave me the guy's name. He'll park the cars for the actors and the crew, and he also provides a bus to go back and forth to the set.
Wow.
I didn't want to go to specs, but that was the only option, and I was going to take it.
Right.
So we got everything squared away, and we began to shoot. Now, the lady that was yelling at us from the terrace about blocking everything up and calling the police came down and said to my producer, now my producer recognized her. So she said, what are you shooting? She says, well, it's a film called Ice Cream in the Cupboard, written by a guy by the name of Pat Moffett back in New York about his wife and so on. She says, may I read the script? And she gave her a script, and she went back in the house. She came out 2 hours later, this lady, and she said, well, I have to be in this movie. This is an amazing movie. I can't. I'm so moved by the script. I can't wait to read the book.
Right.
Maybe get me in here somewhere. And so they called me in New York, and so the lady that called the police was actually Jamie King, who played Dr. Cohen in the movie.
Wow.
And she's been in Pearl Harbor. She's been quite a few films. So it was a wonderful score for me to be able to get an actress of that quality after she called the police. So it all worked out in the end.
That's awesome. So what did she like about the script?
She just felt that it was one of these things that when she's a young woman herself, the whole acting crew was fairly young. She just didn't believe that any of these things went on. And what my wife went through and what I went through in dealing with this. And I think that's what draws the people in to want to be in this. Mm-hmm. I've never played anything like this before. And so they're interested in the role that any connection to this because of its early onset Alzheimer's that they had no idea about.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. So you wrote the book. Did you also write the screenplay?
The screenplay was written by Jared Rosenblatt and John Ray.
Okay.
There were two screenwriters of that. I had a lot of changes. I had to approve everything as executive producer. And I wrote most of the scene that you're going to see in a hospital with another actor, by the way, Tobin Bell, who was in the film Saw. He's been pretty famous for that. He was in The Firm. Excellent actor. They wrote a beautiful, two good guys, Jared Rosenblatt and the other one.
Right. Right. So what was the most difficult part transitioning from a book to a film?
The most difficult part for me, and I had to leave it to the professionals and listen to what everybody was saying, because I was brand new to this business. I came from the cargo world, as I mentioned before, and the whole difficulty I had was what parts I had to leave out of the film that I loved in the book. You got to make some of that separation because there just isn't any time.
Right.
If we did the whole book and made a movie out of it, we'd have a 7-hour movie and everybody'd be sound asleep.
Right.
So I had to take the director's direction on that and said his advice and say, hey, Moff, you really can't do this because it's too many characters, too many introductions. We're going to waste too much time, and we want to stay in 90 minutes. So that was a difficult part, and I bent, and some things I didn't bend on. Right. I said, no, I got to have that in.
Right.
And we all worked it out. It was negotiated.
Right. Is that the only book you've written, and do you have any books planned for the future?
What I have planned for the future is the book Fortunate Soldier. The last 2 chapters is about me coming home from Vietnam. And there was a couple of things that really happened in there that were almost right out of the Twilight Zone.
Right.
So I'm going to take those 2 chapters and rewrite them and put 5 characters and make them now a Twilight Zone kind of a short story and then turn that into a script.
I see. Could you tell
us? At the same time, Ice Cream in the Cupboard, we're always marketing, always pushing, always doing talking, podcasts, anywhere I can get that word out, because that awareness is my goal and my passion.
Yeah, for sure. Can you tell us a little bit about that Fortunate Soldier? What was your experience that the last 2 chapters cover? What was that like coming back from Vietnam? Well,
in 1969, when I got home, a lot of young people don't know this today, but unless you look in the news history, we were not welcomed home. Mm-hmm. We were called baby killers, and it was a terrible arrival. You just really wanted to get back. You had to get your new uniform, and you got home. And when you got home, you got out of that uniform and blended back into society and never really raised your hand or made a big raw about being a Vietnam veteran because we just weren't appreciated, only appreciated by very few. Family and a few friends was pretty much it. Mm-hmm. But when I arrived back in Travis Air Force Base in California, there were these 5 people that welcomed me home in a certain way. Mm-hmm. And so that's why I told the story that way, because I wanted to put a little nice part to this, that not everybody hated us. I happened to have a wonderful experience, and I wanted to get that experience out to the general public.
Yeah. Okay. Well, good to know. Let's talk a little bit more about Alzheimer's. So, do we know what causes it?
Yeah, well, as in the case of the early onset, it is generally always genetic. Okay. So like in Carmen's case, 2 sisters, brother, there's no question. That's genetic. That's 4 out of 4 siblings. Right. That's very rare. So when I was involved in this, when I started to do all this research, I found an elderly aunt of the family in North Carolina, who was also Puerto Rican and was living there. And I knew Carmen's mother had died of cancer, but she was lucid until the end. She died as a young woman. But the father was an alcoholic and died of cirrhosis of the liver. Mm-hmm. So I got a hold of this aunt and I said, is there anything you can tell me about Carmen's father? Was there anything unusual? I know he was a big drinker and he had liver cancer and that. She said, well, the oddest thing, she said, a number of years ago before he died, he would go to work. He was a garment cutter in Manhattan. And he would go out to lunch. He couldn't find his way back to his job. Mm. Then several times he couldn't find his way back to his house that he traveled back and forth in for 30 years. He got lost on the subway. And that's when everything started to fill in. Mm. That's the direction of the genetic. Came from the father, not the mother. Yeah. Who came from Spain, migrated to Puerto Rico, married Carmen's mother, and then they moved here. Mm-hmm. So that was the traceability that I had. That's all I had to go with. Of course, that was 1955 when he died. Right.
So there's been quite a few famous people that have suffered from this and died from dementia-related diseases.
Yes.
Can you name some?
Well, there are actors from way back in the 40s, Rita Hayworth, who was very popular. But the one that I have to mention most recently was Robin Williams. Now, he had something called Lewy body's disease. Mm. It is a form of dementia. It's not Alzheimer's, but it's one of the dementias. There are about 7 of them. Okay. And he had Lewy body disease, but he suffered from severe depression. Mm-hmm. And then he came along with this Lewy body's disease. It could have came from the alcohol. He used to do drugs at one time. And Lewy body's disease is very much in the word of hallucinations. I see. Constant hallucinations are coming at you. Right. You're seeing all kinds of crazy things, plus the depression. He knew he would never appear on a stage again. He knew he was done, and that was all he had. That was what he had in his life. And then he committed suicide. But it was hardly ever mentioned. I found it on Yahoo about 2 weeks later that after the autopsy, they did find evidence of Lewy body's disease that he suffered from. Wow. And no one knew that.
Amazing. So you can detect this through an autopsy by examining the brain structure? Is that, yeah.
Yes, exactly. And they look, the in the brain, I never like to get too much into the scientific or medical parts, but there is a protein called beta amyloid. Okay. The beta amyloid protein grows in the brain of an Alzheimer's patient, and it wraps itself around the memory cells and kills them. Mm-hmm. All the way through, and that's how the disease being developed. And then as it grows, all the other body organs start to quit. So with the day Carmen passed away, I received a call in my office that I better get the family together and get down there by that evening because they didn't expect her to make it through the night. Right. And sure enough, we got there about 6. She passed away about 9 o'clock. Her lungs went, her bladder went, everything just collapsed at one time, all caused by the Alzheimer's.
Wow. So you said that there are 7 different dementias. One of them is called Alzheimer's? Or did I have that
Alzheimer's is one of the dimensions. You have Lewy body's disease. I couldn't give you the breakdown of all of them. Lewy body's disease that I mentioned with Robin Williams. We have Parkinson's dementia, Pick's disease. There's 5 or 6 of the dementias that when they rule all of those out, they have ways of doing that. What you're left with is Alzheimer's.
Okay. So how is Alzheimer's distinct from the others?
Right, yeah, but it's usually, at one point, it's getting better now, it was only found during an autopsy. But there are ways to eliminate the other dementias, and when you last one, then that's what you're diagnosed with. But now they're making some progress with blood tests that doctors can not exactly cure it, but it can lead them into a pathology of being able to see who might be susceptible to this gene.
I see.
APOE4.
There's no cure, but they have treatments and certain drugs and stuff that can alleviate.
There are basically two drugs that they use now, Aricept and Namenda. These are only used to slow down the disease. They're not going to cure anything. They slow it down. But in early onset, it's very hit and miss. It works better with slowing down the elderly cases. In Carmen's case, it didn't even look like she had medication.
Wow.
The disease just accelerated so quickly. And she was in a nursing home within 2 years. That's very fast. She would have been able to be home much longer than that. Mm-hmm. But she was so violent, we didn't have any choice, and it wasn't slowing down.
Wow. How big is this in the United States? Is it
how big are the cases?
Yeah, like how many caregivers are involved and how many people are suffering?
We have 5 million Alzheimer's cases in the United States right now.
Wow.
And going higher. 4% of that is early onset under the age of 65. Mm-hmm. Now, they don't keep any records for early under 50 or something like that. But we just 2 years ago, lost our youngest case on Long Island. And he was contracted the disease at 32 and he died at 43.
Wow.
2 young children who probably, all of us are in my children and the gentleman I just mentioned, the percentages of them getting Alzheimer's is extremely high when it's early onset. So if it's in my family and not in your family, and we both go to our 80s, we have the same amount of getting it as an elderly case.
I see.
In the early onset, it changes. The pace changes, and the percentages go up for the genetic one.
Mm-hmm. The cases you mentioned, it seems to be about a decade before the onset and death. Is that typical?
Right. That's about right for the female side.
I see.
It's about 10 years or so. Carmen's case was quite long. She died in 2010 and was diagnosed in 1998. So if you go first to one end to the other, it was 12 years. That's extremely long. It's usually 10 or below. Some of the cases are a little bit longer.
Is it something that gets progressively worse, or did the medication help to calm the situation? Or
No, it just gets progressively worse, and it's just the medications that I work with will try to help slow it down, slow the progress down of the disease, but that's about pretty much all it can do. And at there's some point in time, you really get the feeling that it's really not working at all.
Well, Pat, that's a fascinating story. I am going to check out the movie today, Ice Cream in the Cupboard. Okay. We're going to put it out to all our listeners that they should definitely check it out. And it's a great story. I really appreciate your time today, Pat.
Okay, it was so much fun being here, and then you can't imagine how much you helped me get that awareness word that I've been trying to get. This is such a pleasure to be with you and your listeners.
Fantastic. Thank you, Pat.
Okay, be well, Luke.
Bye-bye.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Newtown Big Dreams podcast with your host, Luke Menkes, and his authentic guests. And we love our listeners and hope you subscribe now to learn more about the amazing journeys of our incredible guests who relocated to find a new town, big dreams. And remember, make your dreams big.